Good evening and welcome to the Sound Off Show. My name is Linda Kirker and thanks so much for joining us tonight. I always appreciate that. I hope you tune in regularly. And welcome to spring. It finally almost arrived. We have a little bit of a challenge with snow on and off, but we'll get there, folks, and we'll have some beautiful spring weather. Just be patient. And also, to start the program, I would like to, as I did last week, share just three short quotes that I think are very meaningful for us as Americans. The first one is by Abraham Lincoln, and his quote is this, quote, "The people are the masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who would pervert it." That's our job, folks. If we elect people to abide by our Constitution, our founding documents, and they don't do it, and they kind of kick the Constitution aside, then it's our job as citizens to find new people to elect who will respect not only the founding documents, but the people of this country. Okay, the second quote is by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and his quote is this, "The group consisting of mother, father, and child is the main educational agency of mankind." Think about that. The family is the beginning of education for our children, teaching them work ethic, personal responsibility, accountability for the kind of job they do. You've heard me talk about that. I was raised that way at home, and I'm so grateful for that. Those tools have helped me through my life in ways that I can't even explain to you. So you want to do yourself and your children especially a favor, teach them those basics, and you will never be sorry. And the last quote is this, by Thomas Jefferson, quote, "When the people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty." And we need to stop fearing government and start speaking out and acting out politically and positively to let the people who have been elected and who supposedly represent us in Congress and even in our states, that we want the best from them, and we expect them to do what is right under the law. And we have, I'm going to speak with my guest, a touch on this as well, and that is that government today is stepping into every aspect of our lives, and this has to stop. There are certain designated roles for government, and then stop government and let the people and the businesses take charge. Okay, I've had my say. Now it's time to introduce my guest, who is one of my favorite guests. Welcome, Rob Roper.
Hey, Linda. Good to see you.
Yes, good to see you.
It's almost spring day.
Yes, and Rob is the president of the Ethan Allen Institute, a wonderful organization in the state of Vermont. And I'm going to let you tell the folks basically what the Ethan Allen Institute is about. People should really get involved with your organization. You learn an awful lot from the information that Rob and others impart through this organization, and important things for us all to know and be on top of. So would you like to share a little bit about the Ethan Allen Institute?
Sure. We're a 501c3 educational organization, and our educational mission is to teach the people of Vermont about the fundamentals of a free society, those things that are necessary for a free society, so individual property rights, constitutional government, low taxes is a big thing that we go for, that we spend a lot of time on. And today we have to talk a lot about having a secure voting system, because our system for electing people to represent us in Montpelier or Washington, D.C. is really quite broken. And we focus particularly on Vermont policy, so I'd like to talk a little bit about this bill S-15 it's already made its way through the Vermont Senate, and I think will be taken up very shortly by the House. And Vermonters need to understand what's happening with that bill, because there's a lot of misinformation about how well all-mail voting worked in the last election, and we really don't know. We really don't know how well it worked, because there are no safeguards that have been put in place for mailing live ballots out to everybody on the voter checklist, all the active voters on the voter checklist. It's a very reckless proposition, and as we get into the details, you'll see that there's no safeguards. They say there's no voter fraud, but what there really is no mechanism for determining how much or how little there is.
That's right.
And that's really an unacceptable situation.
Amen to that. Our votes are so important. They are I don't know if I'm using the right word, but a gift to the citizens of this country and this state to have that right to vote. You have that right because you're a citizen and documented legally a citizen of the state and the country, and you're right. This bill it's frightening.
Yeah, no, it's really frightening, and the thing that makes us have confidence in we're a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy, and I hate it when people say that. But whenever you're talking about voting, the word democracy comes in. So I just want to let everybody know, I know it's a constitutional republic, but if I'm talking about the democratic processes within our constitutional republic, what makes it work is the principle of one person, one vote. I get one vote, you get one vote. Bill Gates gets one vote. The homeless person gets one vote. We're all equal when we go into the voting booth.
As long as we're all legal citizens.
Well, yes. I mean, as long as we're all legal citizens. It breaks down if I get to vote multiple times and you don't get to vote at all. That's where the system doesn't work. And the problem that we have with this bill, the way we did, what happened was with the COVID, we put in some emergency measures in the last election, and we can argue about whether they were necessary or not. I'm not going to argue that today, but the long and the short of it was, we decided, instead of having people show up at the polls, for the most part, because we have very easy access to absentee ballot in Vermont, or we did under the current system before this bill passes, we decided, instead of having somebody request an absentee ballot, a formal process where you call the clerk, say, I would like to vote absentee, please send a ballot to this address. They send it to the address, you fill it out, you send it in. There's some safety mechanism there when you're requesting it. It's not a perfect safety mechanism, but what they did this last election is they just mailed ballots to everybody who was on the voter checklist, regardless of whether
they were dead or
asked or not. Yes, and a lot of people have moved a lot. I think if somebody's died, you can kind of figure that out. That's a kind of fraud that you can catch because the person's dead. But when somebody moves away, either to another state or to another legislative district within the state, there's just not a lot of follow-up that happens is that there's no purging of the voter rolls. It's very hard to get anybody off the voter rolls in Vermont, and that's, I guess, that's by design. You don't want people just to willy-nilly say, oh, Linda Kirker moved away, and take her off the rolls, okay, and scratch you off. Turns out you didn't leave, and then you wonder why you can't vote. So I understand why it's hard to take somebody off the voter rolls. It should be easier than it is, particularly when evidence is presented. But it created this, there are over 500,000 people who are registered to vote in Vermont. So they mailed out 506,000 ballots to everybody. Now only 350 or 370,000 people voted. So that means there's like 135,000 ballots out there that are floating around that are unclaimed or unwanted. Because, even in a good year, we had a record turnout. It was 73%. So more than a quarter of the people who are registered to vote just choose not to for one reason or another. Maybe they're dead. Maybe they moved away.
Maybe they're down south.
Yeah. Maybe they've moved down south. Maybe they just don't like any of the candidates. But for whatever the reason is, 25% of the ballots, live ballots, are out there floating around. And there was on a radio show, the morning show with Marcus and Kurt, or Morning Drive with Marcus and Kurt on AM 620. Jim Kondos was on last week, our Secretary of State. And at the end of the show, Kondos was saved by the bell, but at the end of the show, this great caller called in and said, I'm from Middlebury. And first he said that, my son is moved out of my district 2 years ago and now lives in Burlington. I'm still getting his ballots in Milton. My daughter moved to Brooklyn, New York 6 years ago. I'm still getting her ballot, getting mailed a ballot for her. And this guy could fill those things out and send them in. Nobody would catch him. But the kicker, and this is the one that really got him, and he says, but I want to tell you this. I own a apartment building in Middlebury. Mm-hmm. And during the election, there were 25, 30 ballots that in the lobby of this place, because the mail comes in, somebody takes the student graduated and left, and not me, and you just toss it away. So the students came in, they scooped them all up, they filled them all out, and they put them in the mailbox.
Students?
Students at the college, I guess, at Middlebury. And I'm sure this is going on all over the place.
Oh my gosh.
And because there is no mechanism for catching anybody who does that. Now, there are states that do all mail-in balloting, such as Colorado, Utah, Washington State. I think there are a couple more that do the mail-in ballots. Well, they have ID requirements. When you get your ballot, you sign it, and they have what's called signature check. So if your signature if the signature you don't sign the ballot, you sign an envelope that you put the ballot into, because your ballot is secret. But they take the envelope and they have a signature on file for Linda Kirker, and they have the signature on the envelope, and if the signatures don't match, then that ballot, that you get a call. You get a call from the clerk, say, Linda, your signatures don't match. You have a chance to rectify this. You can send us an ID, or they have several procedures for figuring it out.
A lot of work.
It's work, but that's what you have to do, because because one person, one vote means if I get a hold of your ballot, or if I'm a student at Middlebury and I scoop up all these ballots that are floating around out there and send them in, I'm voting 25 times. Or if I get my sons, I've got 2 college-age kids, and they were very passionate about voting in the presidential election, but I just got their ballots at home for the municipal elections. They didn't care. I mean, it's like, I don't know anybody's running for school board, and I don't care what the school budget is. I don't know the issues. I'm not going to vote. I very easily could have filled those ballots out and sent them in, and nobody would have known. This is the question that needs to be asked about this S15 that nobody asks. Everybody says, is there voter fraud in Vermont? And the Secretary of State, the town clerks, for the most part, will say, no, there's no voter fraud in Vermont. We had 7 instances of potential voter fraud in the last election. 7. One of which turned out to be legitimate fraud. It was a guy who tried to vote twice to test the system to show that he could do it. But in all of these cases, it was incidences of people trying to, or clerks thinking that Linda Kirker was trying to vote twice as Linda Kirker. Linda Kirker sent in an absentee ballot. Linda Kirker then showed up to vote. She tried to vote twice. That is a crime. Or the other 6 events were clerical errors where it was Rob Roper Sr., my dad, voted, and Rob Roper, well, actually, I am the third. My dad's junior, and I'm the third. Junior voted, and Robert Roper the third voted, and they thought it was the same person. And then they realized they're mistaken, that we're 2 people. And they can catch that. The system works very well for that, because if you vote, they keep a record that you voted. And then if you try to vote again, they see that that's on the record. But there is no mechanism in the system for if my kid decides that they don't care about the municipal election and who the next school board and select board members are, I fill that out and send them in. He doesn't show up to vote. That's the only check, is if the legitimate voter shows up to vote. And as we've said, even in this high turnout election, 25% of the people don't turn up to vote. So we have to put a mechanism into this bill that assures me and you and everybody else that the system is transparent enough that you can't do that and get away with it.
The Senate passed it, right?
The Senate passed it 27-3.
But the House hasn't had it yet.
The House hasn't taken it up yet.
And wouldn't you think that before you would consider voting for or even having a bill like this where you just dole out, ballots to everybody, wouldn't you think that you would have a system in place that would protect the vote, as you're saying, that you know that these are legitimate, right, Linda? Legitimate voters, and that there weren't ballots going out to people who have passed away. I mean, what if somebody is a Vermonter, but they're down south for, during the election, and so maybe they're not going to vote, but the ballot comes to their house?
Yeah, you fill it out and send it in.
Somebody else can.
Now here's a couple of things that are worrisome about this as well, because maybe if you vote absentee, and you do want to vote twice. You show up at the town clerk's, say, I'm going to vote twice as Linda Kirker. And they say, well, Mrs. Kirker, we've got you checked off as having voted absentee. You say, I didn't vote absentee. What are you talking about? I never got a ballot in the mail. Okay, Ms. Kirker, will you sign this affidavit that says that you didn't vote absentee?
But that doesn't change anything.
And they take your word for it. And you go in the voting booth and you fill out another ballot and you do. And here's the thing about this bill. Because they allow the processing of ballots 30 days before the election, 2 things can happen. If you did that, they couldn't get the first ballot out because it's already been processed. And once they take it out of the envelope and put it through the machine, it's anonymous, right? That's the secret ballot. We want to keep that. We want to keep the secret ballot. So if I steal your ballot, and send it in, sign your name, and you show up to vote, even if you legitimately say, hey, I never voted absentee, and they say, okay, we take your word for it, you've signed the affidavit, that fraudulent vote still gets processed because they can't tease it out. They don't know who I voted for fraudulently.
Even having the person sign the affidavit doesn't help the legitimacy of the vote.
No, so either that person who did your vote in your name absentee amplified your vote, giving you a second vote for your candidate, or negated your vote.
Sure.
So, and this is everybody talks about voter suppression and whatnot. If somebody steals a vote and votes twice, votes in somebody else's name, puts pressure on somebody to vote a certain way, then that's voter suppression. Because if you've canceled out my vote by casting a fraudulent vote, it's the same as if you locked me in the basement on election day and didn't let me cast my ballot. And in fact, I would say it's worse, because if you did actually lock me in my basement on election day and not let me go to the polls to vote, I would know about it, and I could call the police, and I could call an election official, and I could call the press and say, this person stole, suppressed my vote, didn't let me go to the polls. Whereas if somebody finds a ballot in the trash can at the post office and negates my vote that way, I put on my little sticker and I say, I voted, I'm so happy. And I have no clue that my vote didn't matter.
Well, the bottom line, Rob, is that there needs to be a process in place that secures the legitimacy of the voting system and protects each legitimate voter's vote before any mailing of ballots goes out.
Yep.
And there has to be a tight system that ensures that only legal voters, legitimate voters, vote.
Yes, and we have that when we show up at the polls. And, I think that we should have a voter ID, and I've seen polling, even in liberal Vermont, between 70 and 80% of people think that you should have to show an ID in order to vote.
Yes.
Because that's just common sense. It's the only way one person, one vote remains viable. Now, I personally don't care how we set up a vote so long as it's safe. I don't care if it's by mail. I don't care if it's by computer. I don't care if it's in person. If they could figure out a way to let people vote telepathically, I would be fine with it, so long as that you could guarantee that nobody's voting twice and nobody's able to exert undue influence over somebody else. I mean, that's another part of mailing the ballots out is the states that do it, such as Colorado and Utah, they outlaw a thing called ballot harvesting. And Vermont specifically didn't. They had debates over this and said, no, the only people who are prohibited from going around and collecting ballots who are candidates and paid staffers, which is really not the problem with ballot harvesting. The problem with ballot harvesting is groups that are like political activist groups going around on, they arm 100,000 kids with bicycles and they start going, pedaling from door to door collecting ballots. Now, what happened? There was an election down in North Carolina where ballot harvesting is illegal, and the election was thrown out for a congressional race, the North Carolina 9th in the 2018 cycle. And I got to point out that the North Carolina 9th congressional district is larger than Vermont. It's 790,000 people. We're 620,000 people here. So it's bigger than our statewide election. And that election was tossed out by a judge because of illegal ballot harvesting was significant enough to potentially have affected the outcome of the race. And what happens is you have these political operatives are going around collecting ballots from people. Well, in some cases, I don't really know how I want to vote. Here, let me help you. I'll show you how to do it. Or I have no intention of, a pox on both their houses. I'm not voting in this election. Okay, well, let me take your ballot for you, and I'll return it to the town clerk or the city clerk or whoever, because you're supposed to do that. If you're not going to use your ballot, you're supposed to turn it. Let me handle that for you, and then they fill it out.
Sure.
The other one is can I carry your bag? Who'd you vote for? I voted for Stan Smith. Well, Stan Smith's not the person who's paying me to pick up these ballots, but I'll take it for you anyway, and into the trash it goes.
Yep.
So all of these things can go on without these protections in place, and Vermont has not put any of them in place.
Well,
it's a total free-for-all, and there's no transparency, there's no safeguards, and we have no idea. 76% of the ballots cast in the 2020 election were absentee. And in our absentee ballot system, particularly with all mail-out voting, we have no idea how many of those, any absentee ballot is either legitimately or illegitimately cast. We can't verify it either way. It could be, all of them could be illegitimate, and none of them could be illegitimate. But I think that there's probably significant amounts of voter fraud going on in there. And I'll give this, then we can change topics on this. But I want to leave people with this thought, because Secretary of State Condos and other election officials will say that, no, we don't have, nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to tamper with an absentee ballot because it's illegal. Of course, elections always bring out the best in human nature, and we always, follow the rules when it comes to that, when it comes to election and fair play. But I want people to think about this. It's a property crime to destroy, steal, or deface a political lawn sign. And people do it all the the time. Nobody ever gets caught. Nobody ever gets prosecuted.
They're out at night.
Nobody ever gets in trouble. But we know that it happens all the time. And we know that it happens. I think there are crimes of temptation when it comes to the political lawn signs, where maybe you had a couple of beers and you're walking home and you're not in the greatest frame of mind. You say, I really don't like that politician. And you go over and you rip the sign in half and you storm off. And then there are crimes that I think are systematic.
That's private property.
Yeah, well, it is. It's a property crime. Every time you do it, I think it's $100 per incident of it. And it goes on your criminal record if you do it. So it should be a deterrent. But it's not a deterrent because people know that they're not going to get caught. And so I would say to the people out there, and this, I will admit that this is speculation, but I would say that the tampering with ballots under the system that they're proposing, where they just mail out live ballots to everybody and you can find them in the trash, you can take them out of your neighbor's mailbox, you can, they accidentally show up in your mailbox. You could be like those Middlebury students that the landlord witnessed, just scooping them up in the lobby of the school. I would say that absentee ballot fraud would be equally or more prevalent than the messing around with political lawn signs, for two reasons. One, I think the payoff is bigger if you steal a vote than if you destroy a lawn sign, and the other is lawn signs are, by definition, in publicly visible places. So at least there's the potential for a witness.
Right.
Whereas if you have an absentee ballot envelope, that can be done, very discreetly. If it shows up in your mailbox by mistake, there's no
Well, the bottom line is that if there's going to be, I would encourage the viewers to reach out to the House of Representatives members from your district or elsewhere and let them know how you feel about this issue, that you want your vote and all votes protected, and for the votes to be, the whole system to be legitimate. And so those folks who are elected, I was once one of them, have a responsibility to do the right thing for the people. And the people's vote is really important. The people have a voice that way. Okay.
I was going to say I promised that would be the end, but I got to say one more thing, because I just put together a 10-minute video on voter fraud in Vermont as it relates to this bill. And it's everything you need to know about it. And in it, you'll see testimony from town clerks from across the state admitting, when questioned on it, how do you catch somebody who fills out a ballot for somebody else? And they also, you can't do it.
I think did you have it on your site?
So far, I've put it on Facebook and I've put it up on our YouTube site. I haven't gotten around to putting it up on our website yet, but I will do that soon. But if you go to Ethan Allen Institute on Facebook or Ethan Allen Institute on YouTube, you'll be able to find it. And in fact, I think I'll give a plug for our friends over at True North and Vermont Daily Chronicle.
Yes.
They've both done stories, having posted the video, so you can find it on both of those places as well.
All great resources. All great resources for people who want to know what's really happening in our state. So, you name those again. The Daily Chronicle.
Yeah, Vermont Daily Chronicle it's an online newspaper run by Guy Page, who's the former editor of the Colchester Sun and the Essex Reporter. Yeah. And he's been doing this for a couple of years now, and it's really starting to take off. And then True North Reports, which I was actually the editor of True North Reports a long time ago, before I did this gig at the Ethan Allen Institute. But the editor is Bruce Parker, and they've got a reporter, Mike Balowski, who does a lot of writing for them. Yes. And so yeah, they've been around for quite a long time, and they come at the news from a more conservative perspective. Three
great resources for people who want to keep up to date with what's going on. I'm feeling like it's dark in here today, darker than usual. I don't know why, but ask and you shall be blessed.
Let there be light.
Yes, that's funny. Thank you. Okay, now we have some other topics here. that you might like to expound on. One is the pension problem in the state. And then we have, let's see, Building Bright Futures and the 500 million child care expenditure. Let's see, what else? I guess those are ones that you and I had touched on briefly. There's the Global Warming Solutions Act, there's TCI, which I've spoken of before. But before we started the program tonight, Rob, I mentioned to you something that's really, really concerning to me, and that is not only the federal government, but our state government. They're getting into a control mode about so many different aspects of our private lives. They're trying to control private enterprise with the environmental regulations and everything, and our homes as well. There's just so much, the voting system, education, healthcare. Now we have government control of healthcare, and what's happening with the hospitals. They're struggling because of, what is it called? One Care Vermont. Mm-hmm. And I find that, I don't know, you could answer this for me, whether it's the legislature, committees, or whether it's departments of government that are setting up these committees and councils and all kinds of unelected people are being given responsibility for coming up with solutions, in quotes, for problems that some people see. But I think that the elected people and the people who are serving in government positions ought to be the ones working on these things. And by the way, these organizations and I should say councils and committees so many of them are being set up. They have significant budgets, some of them. Big budgets that we're paying for in addition to paying legislators and paying government employees.
Yeah, no, the Climate Council is a big one that you mentioned. It's the 23-person Climate Council. You've got the Green Mountain Care Board, which is the first one being environmental policy and a lot of economic policy. It's going to really throw a wrench into our economy if they get some of the ideas that they're talking about. But yes, then the Green Mountain Care Board over our health care, they're building up this racial equity task force now that it used to be just the one person. They brought in Susanna Davis to be I forget what her title is, but I think racial equity director.
Wait.
And now they're expanding her to have 2 or 3 employees working under her. They're looking at a study committee to look at this expansion of preschool, which is, I think it's like a $1.8 million budget to Let's Grow Kids and Building Bright Futures, which are these non-government operations that basically what happens, Linda, is we're giving tax money to people to employ them to be full-time lobbyists to squeeze more tax dollars out of us. It's really a screwy system.
Yeah, not only are they getting paid, but they'll be coming up with solutions that are going to cost us more money.
Yeah, the solutions are going to cost us more money. So they're lobbying for more. Their job is to lobby for more money. We're paying, as taxpayers, we're paying them to lobby for more money to take from us, the taxpayers. I don't know why we put up with it. I mean, all these partnerships with these. There's the Public Utilities Commission,
PUC,
PUC, that decides they have been given what my good friend John McClowery calls an unconstitutional ability to tax us, because they're allowed to decide how much money gets taken off of our utility bill, which is it's a tax, and they really don't have the constitutional authority to do it. It has to be the legislature. But we delegate all this stuff because if we're going to delegate everything to all these committees, why do we need the politicians? It's their job. That's what we elect them to do, is to make these decisions and do these things. And if they can't come to a conclusion, then maybe they shouldn't be doing these things at all. Maybe they should be leaving it to the free market.
I agree. Now, as far as the racial equity thing, I don't know exactly what the goal is there, but and I don't know what the problem is, because if you live in this country and you're a citizen, you have all the same rights and opportunities to work hard, make a life for yourself, enjoy whatever your interests are, to go to school, the public school system. So what kind of equity are they looking for that's not there?
Well, I don't know. That's not one of my issues. We don't delve into that too much. Okay,
we'll leave that alone.
I do want to talk a little bit about. I was happy to see that the Vermont Republican Party, at the state committee at their meeting this last Saturday, put forward a resolution condemning and asking for our legislators to oppose a proposed expansion of the Vermont sales tax.
Yes.
Which is, I'm glad somebody is standing up for this, because it's really horrific. It's
terrible what they want
policy
to tax.
proposal. So what it is the right now Vermont has a 6% sales and use tax that covers basically non-essential goods. So we don't tax clothing, we don't tax home energy, we do not tax food. Those are the essential goods that we don't tax, and we also don't tax services. So when you go to get your hair cut, you don't pay a tax, a service tax of 6%. There's no tax at all. What they're proposing is to expand the sales tax to cover. So you would pay a sales tax on food, on your home energy use, on your haircuts. There are over 200 services that they specifically identify, and they're what you would expect. But some of the ones that you wouldn't expect, tuition. So if you're a student at UVM, and what they would do, they also recommend lowering the rate from 6% to 3.6%, so a 2.4% decline.
Overall, or just for these?
No,
services?
overall for everything. So it would on the good. So the good, you would pay a little bit less for goods, tax on goods, but you would pay more for services. And we have a mostly service-based economy now, but big ones that would get hit. So food. 3.6% of your food budget. If I worked out the average, and I think it's about $450 a year per family. Wow. On food.
That's nonsense.
Home energy. I didn't calculate that one, but your electric bill would have a tax.
And your propane bill?
That already has a tax on it. I mean, it's got a fuel service tax of 2 cents per gallon. But tuition. So if you're a student at UVM and you're paying $41,000 a year in tuition, that's another $1,400 that you have to pay every year for 4 years in sales tax to go to school. Child care. That's a service. I mean, we already say that we've got a crisis in child care. It's too expensive and not available enough, and you're going to then put a 3.6% tax on child care. And all these businesses that are based on service right now, we mentioned haircuts, a lawyer. I mean, you were saying that you had to take care of some legal stuff. Well, 3.6% on a legal bill can be quite a bit of money. For some, health care is the only thing that they would exempt, because it's already got, with Medicaid and Medicare, it's already got some weird funding system. It's not that they had a moral compunction against taxing health care, it's they couldn't tease out the mathematics and the accounting on how to do it.
What it seems to me that our legislature and our Senate and our government employees need to focus, first of all, on dealing with the very troubling and expensive issues that the taxpayers are facing now, and reduce those costs. It's become very expensive to live here. And the pension system, I wanted you to have time to get into that at some point before we're done tonight. And there's a philosophy now, at least at the national level, tax the rich, right?
Yeah.
So,
That's at the local level, too.
is it?
Oh, yeah. No, they just had 2 roll call votes in the House on issues of taxing the rich. One was a 3% income tax, added bracket, marginal bracket, which would have brought on income, I think it was over $500,000 per household, or per filer. So 3% would have brought it up to 11.75% marginal tax rate.
Wow.
For local. And that actually went down. I think only 21 people voted for it, 21 or 24, somewhere in that range. But it's not funny, it's kind of sad. The reason that the majority didn't vote for it is not because they had a problem with levying the tax, but the people who put forward the amendment to do this wanted to use the money specifically for the pension crisis. And everybody else said, well, we might want to tax the rich, but we don't want to spend the money on that. We have other things that we might want to spend that money on. So it's not that they still want to eat the rich. They just haven't decided on the recipe yet.
They're trying to do too many things with too little money.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that. Well, I could be wrong. I've been wrong once before. But there just are too many programs and expenses, and this pension business has to be resolved, and the costs have to be lowered. I know that there's been a proposal in, maybe it was in the Senate, I'm not sure, about adjusting the way that the pensions are delivered.
Well, right now it's just a proposal that's coming out of the House, but I do want to get back to this sales tax on services for a couple minutes, because it gets down to this revenue thing that you're talking about, and this is why the tax on the wealthy is coming up. You know, right now we've got all this bailout money that's flooding into Vermont from the federal level. This $1.9 trillion
to individuals.
Bailout. No, it's going to. They're using $150 million to bail out the pensions. The Biden administration is really loosening up the strings on what it can be spent for, and they're treating it like a piñata. I mean, it's woohoo, we're gonna. It's party time. Now they haven't. We have over $200 million in excess revenue coming in, and surplus revenue from the last bailout. So all this money it's really not helping COVID. It's just, here's money and go spend it.
It's a temporary fix.
Well, it's not even temporary fix. It's a long-term problem is what it is. And this is what I'm getting to, is when you have all this money coming in and they're using it to pay for this program and that program and the other thing, nobody is really scrutinizing how much these things cost. It's like, oh, we've got free money. Let's do these things we've always wanted to do. Well, what happens when the federal money spigot turns off in a year or two, and you've got these things that we've always wanted to do, and now we're doing, and now we're going to stop? The pressure will be there to raise the revenue to do it. And I was talking to my senator about this sales tax on service, and he said they're not going to do it this year because we're awash in all this federal money. But when that money dries up, they're going to want to get more revenue, and this is exactly where they're going to go. They're going to, because if the sales tax on services is not being proposed as a revenue neutral program. Revenue neutral means that by lowering the rate and expanding the base, they're still collecting the same amount of money. They're just doing it on a broader base. This is a revenue grab. Even at the 3.6%, they lower to 3.6%, they're still going to be collecting $20 million in mad money, revenue to spend, plus the way they want to, it's regressive because lower income people spend more of their money on sales tax than do wealthier people. So they want to have a mechanism in there whereby they increase welfare payments to low income people to mitigate against this, which is another problem because it increases the benefits cliff. It creates disincentives to work, and it keeps people trapped in welfare programs. But that aside, so they want to pay for that, and then they want to pay for the bureaucracy to expand the welfare programs. So that's what the sales tax on services is paying. And great. And the plan calls for lowering it to 3.6%. But as my friend John McClowery said, it was originally 2%, then it was 3%, then it was 4%, then it was 5%, then it was temporarily 6%. The 5% was supposed to sunset. When it went from 4% to 5%, that was a temporary measure under, I think it was Governor Snelling, to pay for some crisis thing, and then it was supposed to sunset. And it did sunset. And it was gone for 3 months before the legislature put it back to 5%, because everybody's used to paying the 5% tax, and then it went up to 6% to lower property taxes.
Spending.
Then it went up to 6%. So if they pass this, and okay, so if you're a retail owner and you're saying, yeah, I think we should be on board with this, because why does the service person over there who provides, haircuts, how come they don't have to pay tax and I don't have to? Well, what's going to happen is they'll pass this, they'll lower it to 3.6%, and 3.6% is kind of an odd number, so let's just make it 4%. And then, everybody's kind of used, if we raise it to 5%, maybe we can lower the property tax for education. And hey, everyone's kind of used to it at 6%, so it's right back up to 6%. I wouldn't give it 5 years before it's back up to 6%, and then it's just a revenue behemoth.
But the more that things cost, the more that people will stop and think about, do I really need this? And it may lower the sales because people are saying, wait a minute, I don't really need this. I'm not gonna buy it.
Yeah, I think that in some cases that's going to be the case when you have like college tuition and you have somebody that's looking at a huge bill for college and they say, wait a minute, why is it $1,400 a year more to go to UVM than it is to go to North Carolina State, and you can't really justify that. And it's certainly going to be the case with something like childcare, or if you have an accountant. Why wouldn't you just hire a New Hampshire accountant? We've seen what has happened to the retail sector of our businesses along the Connecticut River because of the sales tax. It's everybody goes across to New Hampshire to buy their stuff sales tax free.
What about $15 an hour being? That's not a decision for government to say you have to pay your employees $15 an hour. That's between the employer and the employee.
Yeah, no, that's. There's so many reasons not to do business in Vermont, and our legislature should be focusing on eradicating those things,
Absolutely.
those obstacles. But instead,
they need to look at.
They're really just they don't think. Too many of them don't think.
They need to look at the big picture, the spending picture, and look at what we have for income. And then match the two. Do you think I go out and spend money that I don't have? There's no way I'm going to do that. I'll do without before I will spend money that I can't afford to spend. But they're spending other people's money.
They're spending other people's money, and in many cases they spend it through mandates rather than through taxation. And that's a good point that you bring up about the $15 minimum wage. It was funny. It wasn't, but it was. When they were arguing the $15 minimum wage a couple of years ago, one of the reasons that it failed is because they realized that if they passed it, then government budgets would take a hit, because a lot of people who were employed through government payment through the healthcare system weren't making minimum wage. And if they raised the minimum wage to $15, then their budgets would have to absorb that. And they would be faced with the choice of either having to lay off healthcare workers or raise prices on healthcare consumers. And they said, wait, we can't do, but we can't do that. It would have meant something like, a $70 million hit to Medicaid, and they didn't do it because they were able to see from that perspective when it affects them. All of a sudden, the accounting sort of makes sense. But when they're doing this to the mom and pop shop on Main Street or the chain of Quickie Marts or whatever, they don't care. But it's the same dynamic as at work. I mean, I've either got to raise my prices or I got to fire workers, and neither one of those is
positive.
Is a positive thing.
Well, I'm a believer in, if you know that the government is forcing your employer to pay you a certain amount per hour, you can come in and you can do the least work that you can get away with, and you still get paid the same as the person who works beside you, who is a hard worker, industrious, just does all kinds of great things for the company, and you're both making the same amount of money. Where's the equity in that?
Yeah.
There should be an incentive to work hard to earn the higher pay instead of just being given it right off the bat just for walking in and starting your job.
Yeah. Well, happily, it's not an issue this year. They're not meddling with the $15 minimum wage as far as I can see. They passed their compromise, so now I think it's $11.75 on its way up to $12.50. But
I don't know what the tuition is at UVM these days, 52,000, or is that out-of-staters?
I think out-of-staters pay, if I remember, it's $41,000 for tuition, and then they pay room and board on top of that.
Okay. When I was an out-of-stater when I came to UVM. Now, granted, it was many moons ago. It was the annual charge for tuition was $2,400. It included my education, it included my housing, and it included my meals. $2,400 a year. Now, how did we get up to $41,000?
Well, government got involved. They decided to help out and make it affordable for everybody. You go back to I think it was 1964 or 1965 with the Lyndon Johnson Act. We're from the government and we're here to help. And they were going to make college affordable for everybody. And this is where we got. They keep pouring more money into the system. The schools are going to always charge what the market will bear, plus whatever the government subsidy is. So, if people will pay $5,000 and the government will give them $2,000, they're going to charge $7,000. And then the government says, well, people can't afford $7,000, so we'll give you $5,000, in which case the price goes up to $10,000. So and that's basically what happened. I mean, you're exactly right. There's a great table that people can find online that shows the inflation-adjusted cost of education going back to that law and before. And it used to be that you could pay for your college with a summer job. And a lot of people did. I remember my dad, when he was in college, he built a car wash, out of cinder blocks with
right?
pipes. And he had a little bit of money that he'd saved up, and he built this car wash, and he basically paid for college with quarters. And he was married. I mean, he got married as a senior in college and had me. And so he was paying for college and a young family with quarters from this car wash.
Wow!
But you can't do that then. Unless you get a summer job as an investment banker. You're not going to pay for your college with a summer job anymore.
Well, no. Getting back to the costs in Vermont, who is responsible for taking a look at the big picture And then, the financial picture, the costs and what we get for the money we spend, and how to reduce the costs, but primarily, it's tough. It is really tough. And these pensions, something has to be done there. I was reading through some of the things that have been proposed to modify the timing for when retirees get whatever they get. And I hope that someone will work on that. The other thing is that we lost 30,000 students between 2000 and, was it 5? And, well, it was 30,000 students were lost over a period of years.
About 20 years, yeah.
Yeah. And so now we have 3- and 4-year-olds in the schools that, we could have reduced the cost of education with 30,000 fewer students, right?
You'd think. It certainly shouldn't have more than doubled.
No. So, there's not much logic from a financially responsible perspective. It's more about unions and that kind of thing taking over. And the people we elect need to fight for what's in the best interest of the people at large, not just certain groups, but the people at large.
Well, if you want that to happen, you got to get involved. And
believe me, I do.
Because believe me, I know you do. I'm speaking more to the folks in the audience tonight because the union folks that are trying to keep those pensions afloat with your money have a very strong voice inside the State House. They're very involved. They are at every single meeting of the House and Senate Education Committees.
Oh, we have a caller. Caller, welcome to the show. We're down to about 3 minutes, so.
Okay, I'll be, the teacher's pension, from what I understand, they can retire at the age of 55 and collect their full pension. Other states not let they're not allowed to collect before they turn of retirement age. And also, they make more money when they retire than they go sub and they get higher pay. Maybe they should look at that.
You mean after they retire, then they do some subbing?
Yep, and they get paid more money.
Wow.
That's in Vermont.
Well, that's an interesting point. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Thanks for checking in.
Thanks.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that somebody has to delve into and make some logic out of it from everybody's perspective. And I mean, I'm a big believer in quality education. And I know that there are some excellent teachers out there, but the education system, Common Core, and indoctrination instead of education, I am not a happy camper, but that's a topic for another time, I guess. Anything else in the last minute and a half here?
I don't think we have time to touch on another issue, but I would just say if folks want to learn more about the voting law, S15, that's coming down the pike, you can go to the Ethan Allen Institute website at ethanallen.org. As I said, the video's up on our YouTube page, which is just go to YouTube and search for Ethan Allen Institute is the easiest way. And it's up on Facebook, so Facebook/Ethan Allen Institute.
ethanallen.org or ethanalleninstitute.org?
ethanallen.org is our website.
Okay.
And then Ethan Allen Facebook/Ethan Allen Institute is our Facebook line.
Lots of good information
So
there,
you can find that, and there's a lot of roll calls we do. One of the things we do as a service is roll call reports as they come out. So as our legislators vote on key issues, we do a breakdown with an analysis of what the vote was about and how everybody voted on it. So there's a bunch of those that are up there right now.
Very informative.
Very informative. So lots of stuff to learn. And that sales tax on services, let's keep a wary eye out on that, because as my senator told me, it's not going to be this year, but as soon as that spigot dries up, they're going to be coming after a big revenue source, and that's likely it. And that has some really expensive connotations for all of us.
Who is looking, the state treasurer, or who's looking at the big picture?
Well, it should be the governor and the governor's staff.
Okay. Well, maybe we need to call the governor's office and at least let him know you're watching and you care and you're concerned, and what are they going to do about it? So, folks, Rob, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it, as always. You're a wealth of knowledge. And, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you again next week. Stay well and keep warm. Good night.